they're blocking you. So
that's just fine by me.
There we go.
Better?
Oh, this is so funny.
Okay, so we will go live.
We're live now.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to
And we
Senator.
need to introduce our wonderful pastor too.
Okay, why don't you take over, Senator Cluxton, and introduce the subject matter, especially with Kendall.
Kendall, we are looking, as you know, because I believe Scott sent you the language. We are looking at a proposal, which you have already seen, I know, because the House came to you early on to discuss the setting up an office of workforce innovation. And the reason this committee is particularly interested in this is after 6 years of looking at the patchwork quilt that is workforce development, with every agency imaginable having pieces of it, many state players, colleges, universities, nonprofits. There are so many players in this arena, and it needs coordination in a big bad way. We like to refer to it as the octopus without a head, with tentacles absolutely everywhere. But it is really, if I'm going to channel my arts metaphor, it is really an orchestra with lots of sections playing out of tune and not in the same tempo. It needs a conductor, we think, really badly. And so that is what has brought us to this proposal of setting up an office of workforce innovation. We know that, so anyway, that is what we are putting on the table for consideration. We appreciate the efforts of the Department of Labor to do some of this, but they are service providers. And it is, to us, in our mind, it needs a step back and a person coordinating it, not somebody who's embedded already and invested in delivering services. So that is what we're putting on the table, and we would love your input because I know you've had some time to think about this, and we would love your input.
Absolutely. So good morning, everybody. For the record, Kendall Smith. I'm Governor Scott's Director of Policy Development and Legislative Affairs. Senator Clarkson, that background was really helpful. As you mentioned, the House did come to me informally when they had possession of H703. Also, I just really want to quickly caveat, as you all can see, I'm working remotely. I have a sick child and a senile dog, so hopefully there won't be too many interruptions. But if you hear background noise, please just bear with me. So the House did come to me to speak about this informally when they had possession of the bill. And what I'd like to hear more about, Senator, and I asked them, was the types of outcomes, because and here's my deputy. In a minute, honey, can you go sit down for this meeting? Thank you. Is the types of outcomes that this director in this office would be responsible for achieving. Absolutely agree with you that there are many players within state government that contribute to workforce development, as well as workforce recruitment, obviously various external partners. Right now, though, how we currently work it in the governor's office is myself, along with other governor's office staff, are doing many of the functions that you prescribe in the language, or at least I saw a version from, I believe, last Friday posted to your website that's titled Section 5 Rewrite. So one of the things that we are constantly striving to do is de-silo the work, coordinate around the governor's agenda. For example, just on this bill, I have a very active meeting almost weekly with AOE and VDOL and ACCD and Voc Rehab and the Director of Healthcare Reform and everybody that's currently touching it in some way, shape, or form. I also, as you guys may know, have been sharing the governor's effort to expand universal summer and after school. There's a youth employment component of that. And so in addition to the folks that I just listed working with me on this bill, I also speak regularly with AOT, who has internship programs, ANR, who runs conservation camps and works with partners in employ youth and many others. So again, what's prescribed, I feel like most of it, at least internal to state government, is already happening. We'd rather see those funds restored back into, I don't know if this is the exact line item of where you were potentially finding them from, the regional expansion workforce pilots, that's now section 6. But I'd like to just hear more about, I guess, the outcomes, at least internal to state government, that this person or office would be responsible for, and what success would look like to you all. Because I'm not sure we need statute. It might be something that we can, using our existing structures and internally, work with you all on.
So I think if people had, I mean, we've known this for many years, that this is a patchwork. If we had had the energy and commitment to coordinating it better, we'd have already done it internally, and we haven't. I mean, we really haven't. I've been watching this for 6 years. And I think Sarah has done a great job. She got hijacked by the pandemic, there's no question. I think the addition of Jay Ramsey is great. All of that is great. I think Tori is a terrific addition. We envision Tori being embedded as one of the two, people in this office. Tori being the director of the State Workforce Development Board. To me, what a great outcome would be to get a bill that had no duplicative aspects, had a system where everyone knew where everyone's part was playing, that they knew what part they were playing, who they were serving. People weren't taking advantage of gaps, of underperformance. We have major WIOA underperformance. I would be setting goals for every one of these partners to achieve in time, with time commitments, MOUs, and understandings with every one of our state partners, both our state partners and our out of state government partners, of which there are many. I think we would be coordinating. We'd be a meeting and pulling all these people together and setting real goals that are united work goals to address this huge workforce shortage. And it would be, and we would have somebody and an office who was holding people's toes to the fire. At the moment, there's nobody holding anybody's toes to the fire except us. And we only have 4.5 months of very superficial investment in this critically important piece of what we're doing right now. And I think that's where I am.
So I would strongly agree with that. I've sort of almost given up on workforce issues because it's just such a potpourri of programs, 100,000 here, 1 million here, a lot of potential duplication. I guess long ago in this role, I've come to the conclusion that if the private sector had all the money and resources that the state of Vermont has, so this is no way they would run a railroad. They'd find a way to maximize these dollars and these people. Yet I realize there are federal strings and regulations that make it harder for government to do it, but it just doesn't, it seems like the same thing comes back to us biennium after biennium. And I know some folks, my dear Senator Brock among them, doesn't think necessarily the answer is to throw yet another position, coordination position at this, but I'm at wit's end. I don't know what else to do, so I'm willing to try and put some real money and resources in reinventing the wheel here. Maybe get some high-priced consultants in there, to professional help, to come in and say, this is what the best system would look like with all your resources and all your target populations. But now it's just all, as I said, I think it's like a Jackson Pollock painting.
Randy, you had a thought.
I did. There's not, as you can imagine, unanimity in this committee on this subject. And I do not believe that it is going to be more helpful to add yet another body to the Circus of Confusion. I do agree that there is a Circus of Confusion, and that my preference would be for the administration to grab this thing by the throat, put somebody in charge who has a real job in the administration to oversee this and see that it gets straightened out. Now, the notion of hiring some consulting firm, some independent firm to help in that process, I'm absolutely fine with that. I don't believe, though, that jumping over chains of command and authority, creating yet another chain that is not entirely accountable. It may be accountable to the governor, but then you have all these other people who are involved as well. I think it will add confusion rather than structure. But I do think that it's incumbent upon the administration to grab this thing and straighten it out. And that's what I would look for.
Well, to respond to that, that's sort of welcome news to me, because I don't know how you get there, but we're trying to get to the same place, it sounds like. I mean, I don't know if an executive order could put somebody in that position that's accountable to the governor.
Yeah. Well, you may have somebody in that position right now who's filling a slot in state government, but isn't doing what needs to be done. That's my point.
Well, do they have the right power and authority?
Do they have the right power? Do they have the right authority? Do they have the tools necessary to do it? And that, again, is something that I think I'd like to see the administration tackle, rather than our creating the imposition of some third party who just will add to the confusion, not straighten it out.
Well,
I don't let Kendall respond to all of that.
Yeah, so definitely a couple different things there. I'll see how much of that I retained and can respond to individually. So starting with Senator Brock, I would agree with you, Senator Brock. The governor has the authority, if he wants a workforce director, that he can appoint a workforce director. If he wants a workforce director in his office, he can do that now, either with his existing staff or with the close to 8,000 people that work in state government. And so that's just, I think that's something that should be up to the governor, whichever governor's in charge, what kind of directors that he wants as direct reports and within his office. And so again, I'd say I largely agree with Senator Brock in terms of we have the ability to do this now. The governor can do this now. He's had a focus on workforce. Senator Sirotkin, I'd agree with you in terms of investment. We would also like to put real money into this. We do come to the legislature almost every year with several different types of proposals to fund workforce development activities and initiatives. They're always mostly largely supported by your guys' committee, thank you. But then a lot of times, as you all know, in the budget process, they end up getting cut and not reaching the finish line. One example of that right here in this bill is these regional pilots where we asked for 2.7. I think right now the bill has it at 1 million. So I just want to say we have been asking for funds to do innovative work in this space, to try to do things to unite the system. Again, they're largely supported by your committee most of the time. Thank you. Just at the end of the day with the budget, they get cut. And so we all know we always have limited resources. And so obviously this year's a little bit different. When you say 100,000 here or 100,000 there, a lot of times that's all we have for general fund surplus and resources. And then in terms of accountability, I mean, right now with workforce development, everybody in the cabinet that's working on this and state government is directly accountable to the governor. So when we say there's no oversight or nobody, again, that has any sort of authority or accountability in this space, I take a little bit of, I don't want to say offense, but I get a little bit prickly there because the governor speaks with his cabinet members directly about this issue all the time. As you all know, the governor has been putting a focus on demographics and demographic decline for the past 5 years since he's been here. And we've been talking about training as well as recruiting people, new people to live and work here, which again, your committee largely supports a lot of this thing. So I know in a sense I'm preaching to the choir. We'd rather see these resources go into some of these other programs and have the governor's flexibility to, again, coordinate at least internally around state government. If he wants to appoint a workforce director, again, he can do that. Again, a lot of that language is duplicative to what's already happening. I think to Senator Brock's point, and the resource question here is, I don't know if we need another director or if we need to better resource our agencies and departments that are already doing this work. I believe the Department of Labor has potentially shared examples already of ways their workforce field staff and development staff over the years have had declining funding. I might be botching that a little bit, so you might want to follow up with Sarah Buxton or Commissioner Harrington. But I would argue that we need to better resource the programs that we have that can work and are maybe not getting the attention that they deserve.
Can I just ask one question? in
Sure.
all of that? Is there a workforce director in the state of Vermont presently?
Yeah.
So technically, if you look at statute, the Commissioner of Labor is responsible for workforce activity. If you were to pull up the Commissioner of Labor's duties and powers, it's one of the first things that you see. And then you'll recall maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, the governor appointed Dustin Degree and Sarah Buxton to be his workforce directors. They both now, with Dustin moving from the governor's office, again, at that time, recall that Dustin was an employee in the governor's office who was exactly as this is proposing, a director of workforce. So again, the governor was able to do that without having this set in statute. Dustin, as you guys know, has since moved over to be the deputy commissioner. And Sarah has taken on additional duties within the agency, but we largely rely on them to continue to be our experts in this space. And then me as myself, as I'm working with agencies and departments with other governor staff, are working on that big picture and de-siloing the work and figuring out how does DOC and their workforce programs, right, link in with VDOL? Where does the Director of Healthcare Reform, Ina Bacchus, again, link in with, for example, ACCD in terms of recruiting healthcare workforce and nurses? Those conversations do happen, and we are making those collaborative connections behind the scenes on a regular basis.
So when you ask about results, we're waiting to see those results, Kendall. I mean, it is still not coordinated. And the big drawbacks of DOL is they are so highly federally funded. They are not, they do not have the stake. And again, I know you go back to resources, but it's a little bit of a catch-22, which is show us results and we'll support it. The WIOA underperformance is not something I want to throw a lot of more money on. I mean, you have time to show us better coordination, better results. And if things were so well coordinated, I think the governor's confidence in our workforce system would be higher. And
I guess I'd like to hear an example where you see a clear lack of coordination, like very specifically. Is there 2 programs right now that you think there's been like some sort of miscommunication or mismatch, so I can have an actual example to weigh in on?
I absolutely think so. I think that at this moment, I don't have those ready to pull up at this moment because my brain is sort of a bigger umbrella at the moment. But absolutely, I'm happy to look at that. We sadly also have, as you know, we only have between 9 and 10 for this committee before we go on the floor. And we have 2 other witnesses behind you. So I'd love to, if we could, continue this conversation, if you're willing to continue it, because I think there's no question we have not fully resourced DOL to do some of this, although their constrictions are substantial. There's no question COVID hijacked them a lot, and we've had that person to coordinate all of this, and it's still not fully coordinated. So I would love to chat with you further about this, and I think let's just do that in the next couple days if we could.
Absolutely. We'll connect and we can find a time to continue. Yeah. I appreciate everyone's time this morning. You all know where to find me.
And we appreciate you joining us, given your challenged household.
Yes, no problem.
And yes, you seem to be coordinating them just fine without an executive order. Thank you very much. And,
thank you.
More to follow, as they say.
Sounds good. Have a good morning.
I thank you, and I think.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we'll move to Drew Hazelton, who, along with our own chair of Senate Government Operations, has put on the table this EMS workforce development proposal to the tune of $900,000. Drew, it's good to see you. You know me, but I don't think you necessarily know the rest of my wonderful committee, 2 of whom are missing in action, but 2 of whom are here.
Michael Surratt from Chittenden County.
I'm Randy Brown from Franklin County.
And this is Drew. You want to introduce yourself and give us a little background to what this ask and the high and the low of what might be possible with this ask?
Sure. Drew Hazelton. I'm the Chief of Operations at Rescue Inc. in Brattleboro. I also serve as chair of the Vermont EMS Advisory Committee. And what we have been working on, what we focus on is mostly the challenge of EMS in Vermont. And of the last 5 years, really that has boiled down to two areas. One is long-term funding, because the funding system for EMS is broken, to say the least. And the other one is workforce. Like many sectors, especially healthcare, EMS is really struggling with workforce and workforce development. The real difference between EMS and a lot of the other workforce is that we're trying to recruit and retain a workforce which is largely unpaid, uncompensated. And we're looking to maximize a number of available resources in communities so that people that are having, medical emergencies or trauma have quick access to, trained and qualified personnel. So the proposal that you're looking at is what represents the shortfall. So over the last 5 years, we've been looking at kind of the numbers of EMS personnel that are entering EMS and the number of people that are leaving EMS. And we're noticing that, our numbers are in fact going down. The other that obviously COVID has created problems for everybody. But early during the COVID pandemic, we had to shut down all in-person EMS education. So what little bit of a stream we had for workforce stopped. So it left us even in a larger deficit than we normally kind of work from. And even now, those programs are not really up and running at full strength. And one of the biggest challenges with those programs is cost. So in Vermont, for the privilege of being a responder in your own community, we give you the ability to pay, $1,000 to $1,500 for your class, and we give you the opportunity to spend 8 months of your life going to school, so that then you can volunteer in your community. And what we've learned is that cost is a huge barrier. Early in COVID, we came to the legislature. We asked for some emergency funding, and we were able to get a chunk of money set aside to cover the cost of EMS education, which allowed us to put about 400 people into the EMS system in pretty short order in the fall of 2020, which helped kind of keep us moving forward until now. But what we do know at this point is that we're not recruiting and we're not retaining people at a rate that'll keep our system sustainable. And that's what the proposal and the request is for.
Okay. Did you ever have any language around this, Drew, or is it just strictly the numbers that you have, that we all have, basically the proposal?
Yeah. So the numbers are what we put forward. We didn't have any specific language with the kind of the breakdown of what the anticipated need was in the different areas.
Okay. Okay, great. So, we also have the only other system that's sort of like this is obviously our firefighters, which has a high cost training, hugely intensive, which we've only added to. I'm just curious, is the cost of training a firefighter similar to the cost of training an EMS? I think it may be more.
So the Vermont Fire Academy is funded through the state, so that education is provided to the local departments and the candidates at no charge to them.
Okay, right. So, and we have nothing similar. I mean, we don't have we have several programs, but it's not funded by the state, and it's not, so therefore EMS, which is equally in many ways as important as firefighters, it is that basic funding to the education is not supplied by the state. That's the chief difference.
Correct. There is one small chunk of money that comes annually. It's called the special fund, and that is $150,000 a year that comes to EMS, which is then divided up amongst, the 13 EMS districts, and that money, does support the 200 services. But as you can imagine, not with a whole lot.
And then there's the money that funds your new person in the Department of Health.
Correct. There's a
what's that? Is it a division or is it just a single position?
I think there's 3 people that work in that office now.
Drew, can you go through your memo and explain each item, what it would be used for? The first one is initial EMS upgrade education for $450,000.
Yeah, and I do apologize. I don't actually have that memo in front of me, but the initial funding is for what we would consider EMR, EMT, and advanced EMT programs. So those programs are the ones that are generally the entry level for people to provide. Oh, thank you. It's on the screen. Provide care to their community. So the typical EMT program is between $1,000 and $1,500, depending on where your education is coming from, whether it's a hybrid model.
Sorry, Drew, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Is that better?
A little. What's the difference? So EMR is the most entry level, EMT is the next?
Yes. So in order to, really the difference is an EMR is emergency medical responder. Emergency medical responders are quite often folks that are working in a community. They're working as a, through a local fire department, a local police department. They're the ones that show up at your house first when there's a medical emergency. The entry level EMT is the level that's required by law to be a primary attendant in the back of an ambulance. So,
and what's the T stand for again?
Emergency medical technician.
Technician, right? Okay.
So that's kind of the base level of transport EMS for your, and it's the bulk of people in Vermont are EMTs. And then the advanced EMT, which is the level that a lot of our state works at, provides another 180 hours or 200 hours of education on some advanced life support skills, airway management, certain medications, and kind of advanced treatment for cardiac arrest and trauma.
So this is described as a voucher program. The EMR is 100 students at $350 each. Is that the cost of a student going through that program, or is that just a small portion of it?
So each of the voucher numbers, the 350, the 1,000, and the 15, should cover the cost of the program. What it will likely not cover is the cost of the textbooks or the online access, depending on whether the class is using online or hard text.
And this is portrayed in your memo as an ongoing request each year. So I'm looking at the numbers here of vouchers you want, being 460 people each year. Is that a defined number or a defensible number of how many new people you need in this profession every year in the state of Vermont?
So
sure.
Yeah. So that number comes from the attrition rate in Vermont. So there's about 2,800 EMS providers. I shouldn't say that. There was about 2,800 EMS providers in Vermont. And that number is dropping year over year. And we lose about 450 people every year that when the licensing comes up, they do not renew. So the numbers you're looking at there would be what we think it's going to take to kind of maintain where we're at as far as the number of providers. Keep in mind,
and right now, who provides the money for people to go to these courses right now?
so many areas, the people themselves pay for those courses. Some departments will provide for that education. There's, again, like depending on the size of your department, they may have a budget item for that. They may fundraise for those dollars, but it's completely done locally at this point, either by the student or the agency they're serving with.
Well, we have in our bill a scholarship program for $3 million for various trades. And I'm wondering if we should include, sounds like we probably should include this as an additional trade in that grouping.
Absolutely. I've actually asked in the new draft to include them.
Let's go on to the paramedic education reimbursement. $300,000 awarded to services for post-completion reimbursement. Is this like paying off a back loan for these paramedics?
So paramedic education in Vermont is challenging. We have one program in Vermont that's run through Vermont Technical College, and we ran not this year, but the year before a voucher program with Vermont Tech to get students through the Vermont Paramedic Program. One of the challenges is that it is not accessible to all students because of the location. So what we heard from the advisory committee was that they were looking for the ability to send students to programs that were closer. So for example, in our area in Southern Vermont, it's much closer to send students to a paramedic program in Greenfield, Mass than it is to be on the campus in Randolph. There's also significant cost differences. Vermont's paramedic program is more than twice the cost of programs that are in other, that are outside of the state. So the request would be that we would get that money to the services so that they could send the students to the most appropriate paramedic program.
How long is the paramedic program?
So a typical program is about 2 years. Some go 2.5 years.
And the initial EMS program is what, 6 months?
So we just scheduled an EMT class out. It's going to be about 7 months.
Okay. It takes them 7 months to complete it?
Yes.
So people who want to become paramedics take a 2-year course, cost $15,000. They're either taking out loans presently, or their agency is paying for them, helping them somehow. And you're looking for 20 vouchers for $15,000 each to help pay the cost of their education. Is paramedic after a 2-year program, they're a credentialed worker, right? At that point, they can take that and go to any place in the country pretty much, right?
They can. So all of the certifications in Vermont are nationally registered. So they're recognized anywhere in the country. So your EMT, your advanced EMT, and your paramedics are all able to take that certification and go. In Vermont, the paramedic program is not a degree program. It's a certificate program. But so there would be no degree, but it is run through VTC as a certificate program.
Randy has a question.
Regarding the particular programs, such as the EMT program, is that a part-time program, a full-time program, so many hour a week program? How does that work?
So it's run in multiple different ways. And, most recently with COVID, Vermont started a lot of hybrid programs. So you can run a full-time program, though that doesn't happen a lot in Vermont. The academy style Monday to Friday, 8-hour day type programs. Most programs are run in a way that's more or that's easier for volunteers. So like our programs, we typically run on a Tuesday and a Thursday evening, and then we run one Saturday a month. So it's 4 hours, and then one Saturday a month. And the program runs about 180 hours. And that's why it takes, 7 months to get through it, is just because of the number of hours and the in the schedule.
Were you to run a full-time program for an EMT, how many weeks would that entail?
About 5 or 6 weeks.
Thank you.
Right, but because it's mostly people who are gonna be volunteers at the end of it, I think it's sadly done around obviously around their schedules. The big problem with paramedics, of course, is that then they become, valuable to everybody else and they get poached pretty quickly, don't they? And so I think requiring a service, if they get these kinds of grants, requiring service here in Vermont for a couple of years wouldn't go astray.
So one of the things that we do is, because we do offer tuition reimbursement for paramedics, is we do our tuition reimbursement over a 3-year period after they've completed their paramedic program. Because of just that, once you're a nationally registered paramedic, there's a lot of opportunities. And certainly we have a national workforce shortage for EMS providers. So people do jump on the traveling or some of the other areas of the country that are higher paying.
So we have a limited amount of time. The last two, critical care paramedic education and EMS continuing education, are these opportunities that are out there online at this point, on a national level, where you can sign into a course and get those kinds of continuing education? I know we can do that in the legal field. I'm wondering if that exists here as well.
So the answer is partially. So critical care education is more of a hands-on program because it involves, you can kind of compare critical care education to like ICU level treatment. So there's ventilators and IV pumps and certain pieces of medical equipment that are really more hands-on. Though there is some programs that are hybrid where you can do some of that education online, but there's definitely a significant portion of that needs to be done, in a classroom where you can have that skill set. We do provide some of our continuing education in Vermont online, and we'll be looking to continue doing that, but expanding those offerings. So paramedics, EMTs, and advanced EMTs have to go through a recertification cycle every 2 years. One of the things that's been identified through the advisory committee's work is that access to not only the initial education, but the ongoing education is one of the driving factors for retention problems, is because people don't have or don't feel that they have the access they need in order to keep up the number of hours they have to have for recertification. So the money that we've put in this proposal would help us to provide that education through some virtual continuing education, as well as some targeted areas in the state.
One last question, because we really
we need to sadly switch gears here.
Unfortunately, there's a big article in Digger, which I'm sure you're aware of, that came out last night. Does that have any impact on any of this that you're asking for here?
There was.
I guess which article and what part of it? I'm not.
Never mind. You'll read it. Just go on Digger. It's all about you. Oh,
yeah. This doesn't have any of the articles that are specifically about what's happening in Brattleboro.
It's about you and Brattleboro.
Yeah, it doesn't have any effect on this request, because this is more. This is what the state needs as a whole, not specific to what rescue is doing down in Brattleboro.
Okay. All right, so Senator Clarkson, you want to move on to?
Yes, Drew, thank you. And our wonderful new legislative council intern, would you just be kind enough to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Rosa Reyes. I'm the Vermont Law School intern with the Office of Legislative Counsel,
Great.
and I helped David come up with the Section 5 rework, so that's why I'm here.
Okay, great. So you're going to be kind enough to be drafting this proposal?
Yes.
Okay, so Drew, you may hear from, you may be in touch with Drew, which would be great as we try and straighten out the language for this.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you both. And we're gonna switch, and Christine, we apologize, but such is life. We only have 12 minutes before we get to the floor, but having not seen this proposal at all until now, it is great for us to be at least being introduced to this broadband workforce development challenge that we face. So Christine,
Yeah,
we give it to you.
Okay, thank you so much. And I want to introduce a couple other folks on the phone, which is.
Well, introduce yourself first.
Oh, I'm Christine Hultquist. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Community Broadband Board. And of course, we're tasked to get every Vermonter connected to fiber optic broadband over the next 5 years. So anyway, I want to introduce the others that are on the screen with me here to answer any questions, and I'll kind of go through the presentation quickly. Can you see the presentation?
Christine, a bit.
Can you see the presentation?
Thanks.
You there?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know what it is.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So anyway, Sandra Sulson, Mike Silvestri, and John Peon are on the phone on the screen with me. They're part of Social Finance, an organization that's been working with us on workforce development. We've been working with Vermont Technical College and Northeast Kingdom Broadband to build a pay it forward fund to expand our workforce to meet the urgent needs of getting 64,000 Vermonters connected. So it's in which, as we venture into this, it ties really well with what you started discussing, around the need for cross-sector collaboration. So, as a broad overview, this issue of workforce development is one I'm very familiar with at the VCBB, because it's one of the key things we've got to address in order to get Vermonters connected. And it's not just isolated broadband, as you well know. You've talked about it here. There's workforce shortages that are affecting all sectors. So in partnership with Social Finance, we've been looking at to address the workforce challenges by strengthening public workforce dollars further by deploying one-time funding from H703 into a revolving pay it forward fund that recycles capital. So the pay it forward fund can train two to three times as many workers with the same dollars. And it allows low-income Vermonters to access training for free and repay those training costs only if they successfully attain and retain employment. And this is we think about low-income Vermonters, they need to make an income while they're being trained. So this is providing the income, providing the wraparound services, and enable Vermonters to get roles in broadband. But really what we're talking about is career development, the ability to move on to other areas. In fact, I've been working with VEIC. We can build a career plan there where people start as a fiber optic technician. They go on to higher paid electrical line workers, which, by the way, average $111,000 a year in Vermont, or go into VEIC and other areas. So, the idea is let's look at career development rather than specific project training. And the communication union districts, this has been a great solution. We've got 9 districts, 207 towns at this point, and there's over 400 people working across the state to achieve the goal of getting everybody connected. But we've addressed a couple issues: access to capital, access to materials, and both of those we've been quite successful on. But the access to labor is the real challenge, and of course, rising costs are a challenge. But the access to labor is the hardest problem to solve because it requires so much time, and we have a shrinking workforce. So we need about 200 plus technicians. The actual number is 216. Fiber technicians require classroom training and and a year of apprenticeship. And it also puts pressure on the electric utilities in terms of their workforce as well. So we really have to look at the overall picture and look at the broader scope of not just our fiber technicians, but the electrical line workers as well. And we can fund the training on our own. We budgeted money for it, but there's a better way, and it supports the needs beyond broadband. So a pay it forward fund is an alternative to traditional grant funding to support workforce training. Under the traditional model, the government sends one-time funding out the door to support the training, but a pay it forward fund can be recycled, which helps more people get through the door in training. And it also is a way to get low-income Vermonters upskilled into higher paying jobs. And only if the student successfully gets through the program do they have to pay it back. And they pay it back by taking a percentage of their income. So for example, someone could work from a $15 an hour job today into a $35 an hour fiber technician job, and they could pay back a small percentage of that, say $2.50 an hour, $3 an hour over time. We also found that employers are willing to pay that as well because there's such a need. So if you look at the journey, and I'm not going to go through this in detail, it's really for you to look at the work. Basically we recruit, and part of that recruiting is having a place and an employer for that person to go to as soon as they're finished their training. So we recruit, we train, and we place them, and then they repay over time. So a Vermonter who's been under or unemployed is really who we're targeting here. And just to let you know, this program is happening in many other states across the country, and around the country, these pay it forward funds have been launched to stretch public workforce dollars. So this is a big opportunity. The nice thing about this program is if we can combine cross-sector, and I looked at the latest version of the bill, so it's on track with exactly what you're talking about. If we can combine cross-sector funding, if we get $10 million in funding, we'll actually get that matched. Social finance has philanthropists who will match that fund. So they get another $2 million. So that 10 stretches to 12. And then of course, you get 2 to 3 times the number of people trained. Sorry, I'm rushing through this. So I'm not going to go through this. So this is where you've got a lot of money in similar sectors where we can work together to put a program. And but since I saw last night that there's already language in the bill to address this cross-sector collaboration. So, this ties right in with that cross-sector collaboration. And basically what we're doing is we're saying, we'll add language that you've already the latest version of the bill already has information about how, and you've talked, about the possibility of the administration having a central focus on a cross-sector solution. But what we're saying is, let's make sure we include the Pay It Forward program in this, and that we we investigate the deployment of workforce training funding for upskilling those individuals in strategic sectors. And all recommendations shall be included in a report to the Workforce Development Board. And I rushed through this intentionally, and I'll ask my partners from social finance if they'd like to add anything at this point.
So thank you, Christine. That was you did a great job going through that in a very short time, and we appreciate. We are due on the floor in 4 minutes. Is it worth pursuing this now, or should we invite them back?
Well, if anybody has any questions, I guess I do.
Yeah.
And I think we do want to hear more because this is an exciting proposition. But the way I understand it, most of the bill takes a very traditional approach towards the subsidies that are being given throughout the bill to just say, okay, we want a work commitment for you for 1 year.
Or
you
2
have-
years,
Or
or
you
3
have to
years.
work here. You're saying that in some of these cases, we can ask more of both the worker and the employer to seed ongoing recycled funds that could be used perpetually or for the future. Is that essentially the gist?
Yeah, that's it. Very good. That's exactly the message we're trying to get across here.
Yeah, no,
And couple that with not just training for a job, but look, and this applies to the medical field, the construction field. It's developing it's having a career development plan for folks. So ideally, they can get into the job of their dreams.
Something that an innovator could.
yeah, something yes, we're creating jobs, yeah. Thank you.
Senator Brock had a question.
Yeah, and Randy have a question, and then we will reschedule you if we may, because
Yeah, that's right. I'd like to take some more time with this.
we don't
Thank
want
you.
to short trip this, but Randy, you have a quick
No,
question?
no, I prefer to wait.
So Randy would prefer to wait. So I hate to ask, but we're in the last several weeks of session, so we're in that funny period where but we will be in touch once we've identified another time that we could do this, and maybe it'll be tomorrow morning. We're gonna have we're beginning committee work tomorrow morning at 8:30, and with VSAC, so maybe we could fit some time in tomorrow morning before 10 o'clock.
Yep, that would be fine.
Okay.
I understand your dilemma.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Lovely to meet you all. And Scott will be in touch about tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, wait a minute. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, you're not for that.
I'll finish.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Thank you.
On that last comment about meeting at 8:30.
Yeah.
I would hope people can, but Alice and I at least we have a lot of catch up to do with VSAC and the questions we have. So if you can be here at 8:30, that's fine. If you can't, we'll just find those answers.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow morning. Okay, off to the